Of the many things that people in the modern world take for granted, medical knowledge may be the most taken for granted. We stand upon the achievements and insight of previous generations, for which we have benefited greatly. Yet in doing so, we tend to look down upon those who lived in the past. We tend to forget that there was a time when the knowledge we take as common sense had not yet been learned. Such is the case with John Snow and the communicability of disease. We take it for granted that diseases can spread from person to person through germs. Yet when John Snow made the same argument in 1848, he had to fight against and disprove prevailing theories of the medical establishment. This is compellingly demonstrated by Dana Toladzicki. However, Snow's argument is almost entirely based upon explanation. It treats consistent explanation as truth itself. Toladzicki notes, quote, "Snow appeals to explanatory power at virtually every juncture," unquote. The prevailing theory in the 19th century was rather contradictory. It acknowledged that some diseases, like smallpox, were communicable, but otherwise asserted that diseases like cholera could not be spread from person to person, but rather were based upon local conditions and the constitution of individuals. A prevailing miasma caused diseases. Toladzicki summarizes the theory in a very concise way. Quote, "Decomposing organic matter gives rise to miasmas. Atmospheric influences might or might not play a role in determining the degree of toxicity of the miasmas. People then inhale the toxic substances, and people with certain predispositions contract the disease. Their internal balance is disrupted, and they fall ill," unquote. This theory of disease was predicated upon assumptions of humoralism, as well as a middle-class paternalism. The poor, with their loose morals, tended to get sicker. While the theory seemed to be explanatory and did help with the sanitary movement, there was much to be desired. Enter John Snow, whose, quote, "theory can explain what the rivals cannot," unquote. Snow proposed that cholera truly was communicable through observation. He noticed that coal miners had been ravaged by cholera, even though the miasma theory held that the disease would not be present in a mine. There were no swamps or decomposing matter in a coal mine. Snow solidified his theory with his observations of the 1848 outbreak in London. Utilizing maps, interviews, and statistical analysis, Snow made a compelling case through observation that cholera was communicable and not due to any kind of miasma. When Snow presented his findings, he was largely rebuked. The medical establishment had developed their own theory based upon observation. This is where moderns shake their heads at the ignorance of 19th century doctors. We scoff at their dim-wittedness. Snow's conclusions are as evident to us as they were to him. However, what is overlooked is that even when Snow was presenting his findings, they were still just that, observations. Germ theory had not yet been developed, let alone the microbe that causes cholera would not be identified until the 1890s. Snow did not have conclusive evidence to support his suppositions at the time. Merely, Snow's explanation was more consistent than the prevailing explanation. Toladzicki notes that, quote, "Snow takes the explanatory power of his theory to be an epistemic property, a property connected to the theory's truth-likeness," unquote. Snow was convinced of his position by the explanation. Moderns find it convincing because these explanations would later be supported by firmer scientific evidence. Would it be any wonder, then, why the medical establishment at the time would have rejected Snow? Moderns deride 19th century doctors for relying upon a convenient explanation that lacks hard scientific backing. Yet Snow's initial supposition is nevertheless a convenient explanation, one that happened to later be backed up by harder scientific evidence. John Snow was a trailblazer in the world of medicine. Not only was he a pioneer in anesthesia, but he is arguably the father of epidemiology. His theories were later confirmed by other doctors, yet at the time, his theory was as much an explanatory story as the miasma theory was.